We were just as close to 2-10 as we were to 10-2.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. We appreciate you, especially you everydayers. Great to see you. If it's your first time coming through, thank you for stopping by. Hopefully you come back more and more often. So today's episode, we're going to talk all about the All Access episode that aired earlier this week with Vanderbilt. And it was an All Access behind the scenes recap of their 2024 season, starting with last spring and ending with this past spring. So it encompassed a full year, and honestly, it was really well done. Narrated by Nate Bargatze and all that stuff. So we're going to get into like everything about that and everything that it showed as far as Vandy being bought in, how they won 7 games, like all that stuff. It's going to show, or it does show. If you haven't watched it, it's on. Hopefully, you can set your DVRs. It was on. It aired on SEC Network. It is on demand now with SEC Network, so you can go in and check that out at whenever you want. So we're going to talk about that mostly today. Like I said, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So this episode of this all access, they did one last year, and I think it was just all access for the spring. It wasn't quite like the all access season season review from the previous season. This one was really well made, I thought, and they did this for every team in the SEC. And I watched some of the other ones as well, just to kind of see how it compared. And honestly, I'm not just saying this because this is the Locked On Vandy podcast, and I think that's what y'all want to hear. But honestly, I think it was the best one that I watched. Now, out of the ones that I watched, I haven't seen the entire conference, but I watched Missouri, I watched Kentucky, I watched South Carolina, and I watched Auburn's as well. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to this stuff, but it was really well done, and I thought Nate Bargatze did a phenomenal job narrating the season review. I thought the way they covered Vanderbilt was also very good. It was more encompassing than the other ones. Like I felt like, especially the Missouri one was rushed. The Missouri one had, I think they showed a couple of things in recruiting, and like it just felt very disjointed. I wasn't sure what I was watching. And I watched the Vanderbilt one first, thinking every one of them was going to be kind of like hey, it's going to take you chronologically through the season. It's going to show you some of the key moments and behind the scenes of those key moments. But for Missouri, it really didn't do that. I thought Kentucky's was pretty good. Theirs was a little bit more comprehensive. Missouri's, I thought, was very short. South Carolina's, I think, was kind of weird because it at the end, it ended with like some music video almost of just a montage of slow-mo South Carolina Williams-Brice Stadium fan stuff, and they did a lot of fan interviews with that one. Auburn's was just I'm really not sure what to think about Auburn's, but honestly, I want to watch some of the other ones as well to kind of get a glimpse of like just how Vanderbilt's stacks up. And I think it says a lot of how they're portrayed. I think the story presented itself, and honestly, the way Vanderbilt's story played out, I think lend itself to be written that way. The documentary piece, so it does make sense that Vandy's was portrayed that way. I don't know about the other seasons or what the angle they were trying to get with the other ones, but Vanderbilt's was very, very well made, and I think you got a really good glimpse into what it was all about. So one of the quotes that stuck out to me from that, okay, we were watching, you see, Clark Lea is always like, I appreciate the hell of you guys, and, there were some F words. Hey, we can go and get it, all that stuff. Like, and the behind the scenes of the Alabama one, like he was super calm, super poised, and just that team fed off of his confident, intense energy in that Alabama game. But like I said, the quote that stuck out to me the most I think it was during the spring, during this spring, and he put up on the board, he put up these stats right here. Not this exact graphic, but he put up these stats, and he said this as he was saying. I'll go back to the stats in a minute. He said we were just as close to 2-10 as we were to 10-2. Okay, and that quote stuck with me because if you look at Vanderbilt's season, they were in a lot of close games. There was a lot of close games that could have gone either way. Like they legitimately could have won 10 games, and they legitimately could have lost 8 of those. 2 of them against Alcorn State and Ball State were not in question. But like the others, it could have gone either way. Just think about it. Here's the stats again. 8 games were decided within 1 possession. You had 2 overtime games, and you had several others that were decided within 1 possession. I think there was only 1 game in there that was decided more than 1 possession, and that was the there was a couple. There's Tennessee, and then the biggest margin was South Carolina, 28-7. But the other ones, like the Texas game, came down to 3 points. And I think if they would have started that rally a little sooner, that game could have gone into overtime, or even better, that could have come out with a Vanderbilt victory. LSU game was within 1 point, within one possession. But the point differential on average of all the losses, they combined, they lost by an average of 4.25 points. And in the wins, it was 5.25 points in the wins. So the wins were close. The losses were close for the most part. Some of the it would have been even tighter without the South Carolina game, the Tennessee game, and I think Alcorn State game would have, I think threw up some of these numbers, inflated some of these numbers a little bit. So just think about that. Like, let's go chronologically, because this is a wild stat, right? This just shows you like how close everything was within the season, and just kind of how clutch this team was in a lot of those situations, because they won 7 games, right? They won 7 games, or we'll say 6 regular season. Okay. They were 6-6 in the regular season. Okay. Of those 12 games, 8 of those were decided by, by 1 possession or less. So most of your wins probably are not blowout wins. So it's like, well, really kind of half of your wins, half your losses were decided by 1 possession, and there was a couple blowouts in there on either side. So it's a very interesting stat. It's a very like, oh man, like this team is starting to develop like they're not crumbling like what people expect. They're not faltering under pressure. They're not doing, this XYZ that Vanderbilt usually does. In the 2-10 season in 23, if it was close, Vanderbilt was going to lose. They were going to fold. They were going to lose if they were even in it to begin with, which I don't think they were in very many games to begin with that season. I think the Georgia game was about the only one I think was close for a little while. But the rest of them, I think, they just got crushed, right? And so we were just as close to 2-10 as we were to 10-2, right? Couple bounces this way. I think, you don't, against Virginia Tech, I think if there's a couple plays in there that if it doesn't go your way, you lose that game. All right. Flip side of Missouri, you don't, even if you just took one play, I think if they don't doink that field goal, I think that Luther Burton touchdown in the second overtime was Missouri's last shot. I don't think they win that game if Vanderbilt answers with that field goal, right? I don't think they, because they held Missouri to a field goal and then they doinked it to tie it, and I think it's a different ball game because that Luther Burton shot in the first overtime was kind of like we couldn't knock him out. Then, we get lucky on a bounce. We get a lucky bounce. They win that game. Texas, I think if there was a couple of drives I think if Vanderbilt gets points on like 2 drives in the second and third quarters, they probably win that game, right? Because Texas was just, I mean, they delivered, they got punched in the mouth early. They delivered their best shot, and then Vanderbilt came swinging back, just ran out of time. Against South Carolina, I just think if they had this year's roster, then they may have won that game. LSU, same. Tennessee, same. In those major losses throughout the season. So, it just comes down to, hitting the 4th down play against Alabama. So, like, that stat is really, really interesting because, again, 1 possession, 8 of your games were decided within 1 possession. And I think four of them were wins, 4 of them were losses. The other 2 were distributed. The other 2 wins were distributed blowouts, and then the other 2 losses that you had were more than 1 possession. One of them was kind of a blowout. So very interesting. Very, it just shows a lot of growth in this team, and that's what. And I'm gonna tell you why there's some growth in that, and why it's not your just 7-6. It's not your average 7-6 season. We're going to talk about that though. We're going to do that next. But first, I want to talk to you about Gametime, because Gametime, it's very cool, especially if you decide to go somewhere last minute. Like if you ever looked at it and go, hey, you want to go to Sounds game today? Sure. All right, let's go. Let me hop on Gametime, right? And you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands, and that's exactly where Gametime comes in. And it's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without all the stress. Like I said, you just flip on the app and it's there. And with the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, and even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it all possible. So what happens is Gametime makes it buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer to you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. So Gametime is the official ticketing partner of the Locked On MLB, or of the Locked On Network, and they make it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming games. Major League Baseball is happening right now, but they also have other events as well. Gametime has last-minute tickets and zone deals for big savings, like 10% off exclusive zone deals for the FIFA Club World Cup matchups. There's some at Geodis Park, actually. So seat views right in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you'll be. And it's so amazing. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And those terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you need a second listen, Locked On SEC is the place to go. And the SEC network of shows on the Locked On Network is second to none. And we just got a new Texas A&M show, so go show him some love over there at Locked On Aggies. And I'll get his name in just a second, but you should go check out his show, Locked On Ole Miss, as well, with Stephen Willis. Is a great idea if you want to catch some just catch some good perspective. I think it's good to say, but it is very, very cool what we've got going on here. It's Matt Galadazan of the Locked On Aggie show. You should go check him out. I had to look up his name because I couldn't remember it. I'm bad with names. All right, but it's I'm sure it's going to be a good show. Can't wait to listen to it myself. But Vanderbilt 7-6 last year. Like I said, it was an impressive season because this stat right here: 8 games in 25 were decided by 1 possession. So that breaks down to about 4 wins, 4 losses. So it's about half your record on either side. Well, actually 4 of your wins, 4 of your losses were decided. So a lot of close games. And that comes into handy as you build your culture. And a team that and I know it seems very fluky to win all these 1 possession games, but also the caliber of schedule that you were doing this against just makes it more impressive because what Vanderbilt had to overcome, with the 2-10 season, they had to endure a lot of roster movement, a lot of transfers, a lot of new faces on the coaching staff and the recruiting staff, a lot of new way of doing things. Like they overhauled everything, all of their operations, all of their scouting processes, their practice schedules, who was doing what. Clark Lea took over defensive play calling, which he in turn gave back to Steve Gregory. Well, didn't give it back to him, but he relinquished them to Steve Gregory so that he could focus on being a head coach this year. Now he's got the ship going in the right direction. But like this schedule, right? It was the same teams, but just when I'm talking about this, just think about the locations being flipped. Okay. So like these are the teams they were competing with, like Texas. They were a playoff semifinalist. You lose by 3 points to them, and you give them your best shot, right? Tennessee was a college football playoff participant. You go toe-to-toe with them, and you run out of gas, and you end up beating them. Alabama should have been in the college football playoff. You beat them for the first time in 40 years, and for the first time you beat a number one ranked team ever. Just happened to be Alabama at the same time. South Carolina, you got clobbered, but Virginia Tech, who was widely considered a dark horse for the college football playoff a year ago, you take them to overtime and you beat them. First game of the season too. Missouri was a top 10 team at the time. You take them to double overtime and you beat them. You take on Auburn and Kentucky on the road. You go and get victories. And the stakes of the Auburn game were a bowl bid. So like you have real stakes on a game, which normally in the last decade, if you had any stakes at all on a game, that was impressive enough. But if you had any stakes on a game, you were going to lose that game as Vanderbilt. Like it just was going to happen. Like you're going to lose those games. That's just kind of the MO that Vandy had for a long time. And they changed that. And it was just a conscious decision within the building. You get a guy like Diego Pavia and you get a guy like Jerry Kill who brings in his fresh ideas. You get Eli Stowers in the building. You had CJ Taylor, you had Langston Patterson, you had some of the holdover leaders that tried to hold things together the year before, but just couldn't. It was a mess. And you had some key voices that were already on the roster, but your transfers did they carried a lot of the weight as far as being able to, get the team, band the team together. So the biggest thing to me for the overhaul was the buy-in, and not just player buy-in, but it was like buy-in from everybody. And that kind of goes into it. And I think when you create growth with these close wins, it usually takes buy-in, and it usually takes these guys believing in themselves. And even though they lost 6 games, I think you take a team that should not lose 6 games that loses 6 games. It's a much different context, right? Six losses is not 6 losses, just like 6 wins is not 6 wins. Or you got to look at context with your wins and losses to show really where you're at as a program. For Vanderbilt to go from 2-10 to 6-6 regular season shows a lot of growth and shows a lot of competitive growth. And a lot of it was player buy-in, a lot of it was player led, from which I learned from the All Access documentary. And these guys they were locked in, zeroed in. They did not want any sort of noise. They were bought completely in, and they treated it like a family. And you saw that play out. And so in seeing that, you're like, okay, well, they're not just fluking their way to 6 wins, because teams can do that. There's been years where Vanderbilt has probably fluked its way to 6 wins. I think the year before was a little bit. They kind of lucked their way into five wins, almost went to a bowl game in Clark Lea's second year. Like I think because he was still trying to figure some things out, and the team, the nucleus was just talented enough to win those 5 games. But I think that was about where it stopped. Culture wise, it just probably wasn't very good still, because they were coming off of a pretty terrible finish to the Derek Mason era, and there were still some leftovers from that. But now I think like it's a slow build process too, and some of the guys that have been with Clark Lea, I think haven't, I don't want to say infected, but like is really just kind of injected their their leadership throughout. And I think it's slowly taken root a little bit. And these things take time. When you take over a bad program, if the administration is patient with you, it takes time. And by doing that, you slowly get the buy-in. You slowly recreate your nucleus. And with the transfer portal, you can recreate your core of your team pretty fast, right? And they were able to do that. And you notice from 23 to 24, ton of movement, gutted the roster. Like it was bad. 24 to 25, not hardly anybody left. Like there was guys that I thought would leave that didn't, like Drew Dickey. Like I thought he was gone because he's a talented quarterback with not an opportunity to get out there and showcase. And I don't know what his plans are. But like I thought he was a surefire transfer. I thought Jeremiah Dillon was a surefire transfer. Like he's going to get passed over on the depth chart probably as a wide receiver. As talented as he is, it just hasn't worked out for him at this point. I thought he would probably be gone. I thought there'd be some other guys that would join in, but there was not a lot of transfers out. There was a pretty good number of transfers coming in. I think mostly, and it wasn't to replace guys that decided to move on. It was to replace and rebuild guys that had moved on from the offensive line, that you had like one guy transfer, but like the rest of them, they couldn't play at Vanderbilt anymore. They graduated, didn't have any eligibility left, so that they were gone. So you were going to have to need to rebuild your offensive line anyway. So that was good to see, because it really reflects on the culture and the player buy-in and just kind of how things are going. And this all access thing does give you a really good glimpse into what's happening and why there's player buy-in, why these guys love coming to work every single day, and why not a lot of people transferred out. So we're going to talk about that, though, next. All right, Locked On Vandy, thanks for making us your first listen. We are wrapping up the show. The weekend is rapidly approaching. We had an episode about speed. It was all dedicated to speed a couple days ago, so make sure you go check that one out. But we're fastly approaching the weekend. So, but I watched this Vandy All Access thing, man. It was incredible on a bunch of different layers. It showed you just how razor thin the margins are in this league. Just as close to 2-10 as we were to 10-2, right? And there's reasons for that, right? There's reasons why that most Vanderbilt teams would have been on the 2-10 side, and very, very few would have been on the 10-2 side. But like I said, a lot of one possession games. Few of them went their way, few of them did not. But there was a lot of growth in here, and that's the biggest thing. And the growth and the growth in the culture, the rooted, this culture is really kind of taken roots a little bit, and you can tell because there's not a lot of movement. There's not a lot of coaches. I don't think hardly any coaches left. I think there's some support staff guys moved on. I think some randoms here and there moved on. I think you had some like quality control guys and some analysts that got opportunities elsewhere that would have been stupid for them to turn down. So no major like, oh, this it's Vanderbilt sucks, right? Vastly different from this time last year, because this time last year, lots of new faces because guys were not sure that Clark Lea was going to be on solid footing. The roster was it was a terrible situation. FanDuel had us at 2.5 wins a year ago, which I don't blame them. Things were awful. They were abysmal, right? And nobody knew if overhauling this thing would actually work. Well, this all access gave us a glimpse as to why it did. And the biggest thing is the player buy-in. The player buy-in was incredible on this team. You saw guys that were happy. They were competing. Like they made comments of, hey, our practices are competitive. We have fun with it. We talk back and forth. It's exciting to get to work. And our fundamentals are taken care of. Like we have to win these reps, and we have to focus on our fundamentals to be able to do so. And they're just, it's like the old adage, iron sharpens iron. It was that kind of thing. It was that kind of culture. It was that kind of deal within the roster. And everybody was excited about that. That's all they raved about. Like Coach Steiner, he he's intimidating. He's big. He has a great plan, and he gets us going. He kicks our butts in the weight room, and we're better for it. Like nobody misses. Like the strength staff, the nutrition staff, the everything about the program gets them ready, and it focused on that. Right. The coaches are very thorough in their preparation. The practices are fun. They're competitive. They're competing. They're developing their competitive spirit and their competitive toughness. It showed. Now, with the depleted roster, it probably didn't show as much as you probably thought it could or should. But like as you develop your roster and you keep on with the competitive reps in practice, it's going to eventually, you're going to inch closer to that 10-2 side, and you're going to create more of a gap from that 2-10 side of things, because you're going to be better in those situations. And like, if you get in that same situation as you were in Missouri, you probably win that game this year, right? Or you get in a similar situation with Virginia Tech, that game does not go to overtime and you win it, right? Against LSU, maybe you don't beat LSU, but like you hang longer. Or like South Carolina is a tough place to play. Maybe you hang longer. Maybe you give them something to consider. Maybe you expose something for other teams. Maybe like there's some things that will happen along the season. They're like, okay, this makes sense because, hey, we saw the roots of this last year, and we saw this competitiveness in their practices. We saw how they competed in these games down to the wire, down to the last punch. We're not, the only game that I think that I don't want to say they rolled over in. They didn't roll over voluntarily. They were still trying, but they just couldn't do anything, was against South Carolina. It got kind of sad against that. Like it just was kind of pitiful against South Carolina. They were out of gas. They were done, man. They were ready for that bye week. Tennessee, I think Tennessee took them lightly. They punched them in the mouth. They swung all the way through, but Tennessee was a playoff team, and they were good. And they showed it, and they flexed their playoff muscle, and they basically had to empty the tank to beat Vanderbilt, which in years past they never had to come close to even emptying half the tank to beat Vanderbilt. So that's an improvement as well. And I'm not one for moral victories, but I think when you're looking at an overall culture and you're looking at a long-term window, that's very promising. You'd love to win every game. You'd love to go 12-0 every year, but it's not possible. And coming off a 2-10 season, that's not realistic. So looking at it realistically, you want to see them compete hard, do their jobs, play clean. And when I say play clean, like play free of mistakes, which they did. They had the fewest turnovers in the country. And they had, I think, the best turnover differential in the country as well at +9. So they're doing the things that are good. So it's the player buy-in is there. It's all there. They rave about each other. They treat it like a family. They're happy to go to work, and that's just a really good environment. And it's a really good learning environment. And I think Clark Lea has done a great job at mentoring Steve Gregory. I think he knows. Like I don't know that he would have so quickly handed over his play calling duties if he didn't feel good about where Steve Gregory was, because I think he did it too soon the previous year. I can't remember who it even was. Not that it matters. But like he almost lost his job, and I'm sure he probably thought twice about it. Like, hey, if I'm going to, and he probably asked Jerry Kill about it because Jerry Kill is a known program builder. Like bringing him in, and I've said it countless times leading up to the 24 season, like the confidence, the self-confidence that you have to bring in a guy like Jerry Kill speaks volumes of who you are as a person and what you want to instill in your program. Because you're not worried. Like a lot of coaches are very ego driven and would not have brought in Jerry Kill in the role that Clark Lea brought him in as, right? Because Jerry Kill he's a go-getter. He's very he's an alpha guy. Like all these college head coaches are alpha guys. And if you bring a guy like him in, he's going to point out things. And if you're insecure about it, then it's going to be nightmarish for you. And so when you look at it and when you look at that move, it shows you it's like, okay, he's very confident. He's very secure and he wants to win. And the players saw that. The players are like, okay, they're bringing this guy, like especially Pavia, because Pavia and the New Mexico State guys could vouch for him and say, this guy is legit. Coach Lee's bringing this guy in. We're going to be great because he can fill in some gaps that Clark Lea didn't have. So all in all, I'm looking forward to a really, really great 25 season. And I think if you want a glimpse into, and I'll leave you with this, if you want a glimpse into why Vanderbilt was successful a year ago and why I feel like they're going to be successful moving forward, not saying they're going to be in the college football playoff this year, but you're going to see an improvement because the roster's built, the culture is built. And you're going to see how the culture was built in this all access. And I think this all access piece does a phenomenal job of showing enough to make you believe that this culture is built and it's not just, BS production stuff. I think there's some legitimate stuff there. And so we're, go enjoy that if you haven't already, and have a great weekend. That's all I got. So hopefully you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you back here next week. Locked on Vandy. Anchor down. Be safe. Behave yourselves. Peace.